Muhammad Ali, visiting his own establishment incognito, froze in his tracks the moment he heard the muffled sobs of a waitress. The discovery he made that evening would expose a sinister secret that had been poisoning the lives of his staff for months. The decisive confrontation that followed irrefutably confirmed once again that Ali was a fighter by nature, great not only within the confines of the boxing ring, but in life itself. If this story reveals the true face of leadership when no one is watching, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and together we will dive into one of the most impressive stories about standing up for the truth. It was March 1979, Chicago, the South Side. 2 years after leaving professional boxing, Muhammad Ali managed to redirect his unquenchable passion for public service into a completely unforeseen channel. Thus appeared an establishment called Champion's Table, a restaurant specializing in Southern cuisine that quickly became a true stronghold and pride of the local neighborhood. It wasn't just another celebrity whim designed to show off status or squander an amassed fortune. Ali personally dedicated many months to working with chefs from the local community, perfecting every dish. He hired staff exclusively from the neighborhood residents, striving to create a place where both working families and business people could enjoy authentic yet affordable food. However, Ali understood perfectly, no enterprise, no matter how brilliant its figures looked on paper, could function flawlessly based solely on impressive financial reports. The true state of affairs was not reflected in profit reports or glowing reviews on Yelp. It lurked in the depths of the kitchens, in the cautious whispers of break rooms, in the dull eyes of staff leaving work after exhausting shifts stretching past midnight. That is why every few weeks Ali made a habit of visiting Champion's Table, acting as an unremarkable, ordinary patron. No theatrical entrances, no solemn announcements for the employees, just a man in a warm winter coat, a baseball cap, and a scarf wrapped tightly around his face, stepping onto the threshold of his own business like an ordinary passerby. In the harsh Chicago winters, the sight of a bundled-up person surprised no one, and over the years, Ali had mastered the art of dissolving into a crowd when circumstances required. That Friday evening, the establishment was packed. The evening rush had reached its peak, and waiters maneuvered deftly between tightly packed tables, skillfully balancing trays laden with fried catfish, stewed collard greens, and fragrant cornbread. The air was thick with the tantalizing aromas of spicy chicken and hearty mac and cheese. Soft, warm light flooded the room with a golden glow, enveloping families, couples, and groups of friends immersed in their meals. Classic soul music played faintly in the background. At first glance, everything seemed flawless, but Ali had spent his life honing a unique ability to read the atmosphere of any room, to pick up on hidden energy, instantly recognizing when something was wrong beneath the veneer of propriety. Even through fake smiles, he felt the tension hanging in the air like a subtle electric charge. First, his gaze caught the figure of the manager, a tall, stern-looking gentleman in an impeccable black suit, standing at the edge of the dining area, watching every movement with the predatory sharpness of a hawk. There was something repulsive in his demeanor. It wasn't just attentiveness, but rather a despotic lust for power, as if he had completely forgotten that his subordinates were living people, not soulless pieces on a chessboard. Then, as Ali headed toward a vacant table, a barely perceptible muffled sound, coming from the hallway adjacent to the kitchen, reached his ears. At first, amidst the general restaurant hum, he paid it little mind, but as he passed by, the sound became unmistakable. Someone was crying. Not hysterically, not for show. It was that silent, deep weeping of a person desperately fighting not to collapse completely. Ali's steps involuntarily slowed. He glanced at the slightly ajar door to the break room. Through the crack, he caught a glimpse of a young African-American woman, likely in her early 20s. Her head was bowed low, and her hands gripped the edge of a metal countertop in a death grip, as if she were trying with all her might not to faint. Beside her stood another employee, a young man in a champion's table uniform, explaining something to her in a hushed but urgent voice. Allie didn't know her name, but the look on her face resonated painfully in his chest. He felt clearly something was blatantly, deeply wrong, and he would not leave this establishment until he got to the bottom of it. He took a table located as close to the hallway as possible, positioning himself to listen without attracting undue attention. His face remained hidden behind the tightly wrapped scarf, but thoughts raced through his mind. This wasn't mundane work stress. This was genuine fear. Allie had started working at 12. He knew the cost of pressure from a young age, and was no stranger to the faces of exploitation. But this was different. This was happening in his own establishment, one he had created. The young man beside her spoke very quietly. However, Ali's ears, honed by years of listening intently to cornerman's instructions between boxing rounds, caught snippets of phrases. "You can't let him keep behaving like this. He doesn't own you." The woman's voice was barely audible, full of despair. "What choice do I have? He made it clear. If I don't do what he orders, I'll be fired. And I can't lose this job under any circumstances. My son is only 6 years old." Ali's fists involuntarily clenched under the table. His first impulse was to stand up immediately and find out what was happening. But in this moment, he wasn't Muhammad Ali, the celebrated boxer. He wasn't the owner of Champion's Table. He was just another patron, an outsider. So instead of impulsive action, he chose to listen carefully and observe closely. Before he could continue his train of thought, a waitress approached his table. "Something to drink to start?" she asked. Ali looked up, speaking in a soft voice slightly muffled by the scarf. "Sweet tea, please. Thank you." The waitress nodded and walked away. But Ali's thoughts were far from drinks. He glanced at the manager in the black suit, who was still standing near the host stand, arms crossed, scanning the room with such authoritative energy that his mere presence made those around him feel uneasy. Then something else caught his attention. The young man he had seen in the break room reappeared in the hall, heading toward a waiter station. His jaw was clenched, his hands nervously fiddling with the order pad clipped to his apron. He looked visibly shaken. Ali instantly recognized an opportunity. He casually stood up and walked toward the service station, where the young man was sorting cutlery. "Excuse me," Ali said quietly, trying to speak softly. "Could you bring some more napkins?" The young man looked up at him, clearly caught off guard. "Oh, yes, of course, sir." He quickly grabbed a few from the dispenser and handed them to Ali. Ali took the napkins but didn't walk away. He glanced at the employee's name tag. "Thank you, Derek." Derek nodded, but Ali couldn't help noticing the tension in his shoulders. "I couldn't help but notice your colleague looks upset," Ali remarked, his voice benevolent but direct. Derek tensed, his grip on the cutlery tightening. "She's fine," he answered too hastily. "Doesn't look like it," Ali countered. Derek swallowed hard, his gaze darting nervously toward the manager in the black suit, then quickly dropping to the floor. Muhammad Ali had spent 40 years mastering the art of reading people. Opponents in the ring, reporters trying to trap him, promoters looking for ways to cheat. He read fear like sheet music. After an agonizing pause, Derek exhaled noisily. "She's not fine," he admitted, his voice whispering barely audibly. Ali studied Derek's face closely, noting the tension in his jaw and how tightly his fingers continued to grip the silverware. The young man clearly wanted to speak out. He just wasn't sure if he could trust a stranger. "Is it related to a customer?" Ali asked gently. Derek hesitated. That split-second hesitation told Ali absolutely everything. "No," Derek muttered. "Not at all." His gaze darted toward the restaurant entrance, to the figure of the manager in the black suit, who was still surveying the room as if everyone present were his personal property. Derek exhaled sharply, cast a brief glance toward the break room, then shook his head. "It's personal. I shouldn't say anything." It wasn't Derek speaking, but his fear, not because he wanted to deceive Ali, but because he was paralyzed by terror. Ali had encountered this before. People caught in hopeless situations, unable to escape due to all-consuming fear, financial need, or a total lack of alternatives. He had seen it in boxing, where young, promising fighters were ruthlessly entangled in nets by corrupt managers, and he himself had endured similar trials. "How long has she been working here?" Ali asked casually. Derek replied mechanically, "About 8 months." Then his body tensed. "Why do you ask?" Ali continued speaking softly. "It just seems like she's going through something very difficult. Does she like working here?" Derek let out a short, bitter chuckle. "No, she doesn't. But she's a single mother, and she can't afford to quit." And then everything fell into place. That was the real problem. She wasn't just stressed, she was trapped. Before Ali could ask the next question, Derek suddenly tensed up. Ali didn't need to turn around to understand the reason. The air around them grew thick with unspoken, oppressive tension. The manager was approaching. "Is everything all right here?" asked Chambers. His voice sounded smooth and calm, but there was such authority in it that Derek immediately lowered his eyes. Ali slowly turned to face the man. He was in his early 40s, wearing an expensive suit, hair perfectly styled. Such a polished appearance often masks something hideous inside. His name tag read, Robert Chambers. "I just needed some napkins," Ali replied softly. "Derek was kind enough to help me." Chambers didn't take his eyes off Ali, though he couldn't clearly see his face behind the scarf. "Excellent. We pride ourselves on our customer service here." He clapped Derek on the shoulder a little harder than was appropriate. "Come on, Derek. Let's focus on work." Derek nodded hastily. "Yes, sir." Ali quietly thanked Derek and walked away, feeling Chambers' intense gaze following him. His resolve was unshakable. He wasn't going to leave. Not until he found out exactly what kind of outrage was happening in his own restaurant. He stepped outside into the damp Chicago night, took out his phone, and pretended to check messages. In reality, he was thinking, this woman, whoever she was gripped by terror. Derek was afraid to speak openly, and Chambers exuded the aura of a man whose power rested on total control and ruthless intimidation. Throughout his life, Ali had faced powerful figures, boxing promoters, executives of major TV networks, government officials trying to intimidate him during his principled stance on the Vietnam War. He knew all the faces of manipulation perfectly and had experienced firsthand what abuse of power felt like. And he absolutely refused to allow such things in his establishment. If he needed real answers, he had to talk to someone who might be less afraid. And then, as if the universe itself responded to his thoughts, another employee came outside to have a smoke. It was a woman, likely around 30, dressed in a champion's table uniform. She leaned against the wall, looking completely exhausted. Ali approached her casually, keeping a small distance but maintaining an open posture. "Long night?" She looked up at him with a surprised but not frightened gaze. "Yeah, Friday nights are always crazy here." Ali nodded. "I can imagine. Do you mind if I ask you a question?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure. Your manager, Mr. Chambers. What's it like working under him?" The expression on her face changed instantly. A fleeting shadow of something dark crossed her face before she composed herself. "He's strict," she said cautiously. "Very particular about how things should be done." "Is that common for restaurant managers?" She looked around, making sure no one was nearby. Then she lowered her voice. "He's not just strict. He forces Keisha to stay alone late every week." Ali's whole body tensed. "Is she the only one?" The woman nodded. "Yes. And the way he talks to her during those shifts, it's completely unprofessional. We've all seen how she looks afterward, scared, exhausted, like she's barely holding on." She paused, taking a drag of her cigarette. "She has a little son. He's only 6. She needs this job, and he knows it perfectly well. Ali's hands involuntarily clenched into fists in his coat pockets. He had seen displays of power like this before. Powerful men shamelessly exploiting vulnerable people, using their position for manipulation, total control, and cruel intimidation. It filled him with deep disgust. It ignited a righteous anger in him, and now it was happening in his own restaurant. "Has anyone reported this?" Ali asked. The woman shook her head negatively. "To whom?" "He's the boss here. If we complain, we just get thrown out. We all know that perfectly well." Ali's jaw clenched. "Not anymore." The woman looked completely baffled, but Ali was already heading back into the restaurant. The establishment was gradually quieting down. The evening rush had long subsided. Fewer customers, fewer unwanted witnesses. Chambers was still standing in the hall, like a motionless sentinel by the service station. Ali's steps were silent, but filled with determination as he crossed the room. He didn't stop at his table. He didn't hesitate. He headed straight for the break room, where he spotted Kesha mechanically wiping tables, her eyes dull and empty. When she saw him approaching, her body instantly tensed. She likely expected another demanding customer. "Excuse me," Ali said softly. "May I have a moment?" Kesha looked shaken. "I'm working right now, sir. I can call another server if—" "I know perfectly well what is going on here," Ali interrupted gently but firmly. Kesha's eyes widened in surprise and fear. "I don't understand what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," Ali said quietly. "Mr. Chambers. Those late shifts, his treatment of you when you're left alone." Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I can't. If I say anything, I'll lose my job. I have a son. I can't afford that." "You won't lose anything," Ali assured her softly. "But he will. I promise you." Before Kesha could answer, an ominous shadow fell over both of them. Robert Chambers appeared, his face completely impassive, but his eyes flashing a sharp warning. "Is there a problem here?" Chambers inquired, his voice smooth as silk. Ali didn't turn immediately. He kept looking at Kesha, noting how she physically recoiled at the sound of Chambers' voice, how her breathing became shallow, how her fingers trembled. That told him everything he needed to know. Then he slowly turned to face Chambers, every movement calculated and deliberate. "Actually, yes," Ali said, his soft voice now carrying unexpected weight. "There is a problem." Chambers' smile became strained. "Kesha is busy working right now. Whatever you need, I'm sure we can—" Ali slowly raised his hands and began to unwind his scarf. Then he took off his baseball cap. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. Waiters stopped mid-motion. One of the patrons gasped. Derek, watching from the other end of the room, went numb. Kesha's hands flew to her mouth. Robert Chambers' face instantly paled, draining of all color. "My name is Muhammad Ali," he said quietly, his voice still soft, but now holding unmistakable, absolute authority. "I am the owner of this restaurant, and you and I need to talk right now." The deep silence in the restaurant became deafening. Patrons turned in their seats. Staff exchanged shocked glances. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, it's really him." Chambers blinked feverishly, his mouth opening and closing in an attempt to say something. For the first time, the man who had terrorized his subordinates for so long looked truly frightened. "Mr. Ali, I had no idea you were here." "No, you didn't," Ali said calmly but firmly. "And that is exactly the problem." He turned to Kesha, his face softening completely. "You are completely safe now. I promise you that." Kesha looked at him, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't speak, only nodded. Ali turned back to Chambers. "To your office. Now." Chambers swallowed hard, his former composure completely obliterated. He nodded stiffly and turned toward the back of the restaurant. Ali followed him, but before entering the office, he turned back to Kesha, Derek, and the other employees who had huddled into a small group. "Stay here," he said gently. This won't take long. Inside the office, Chambers immediately tried to regain control of the situation. He squeezed out a nervous chuckle. "Mr. Ali, this is certainly a big surprise. If only I had known you were visiting us tonight, you would have..." "Would have what?" Ali interrupted harshly, his voice still soft, but now with steel determination. "Pretended to be a completely different person?" Chambers flinched. "Sir, I don't know what Kesha told you, but..." "It's not about what Kesha told me," Ali cut in. "It's about what I saw with my own eyes, heard with my own ears, and what has been confirmed by multiple employees." He stepped closer. "You have been abusing your position, forcing Kesha to stay alone late, creating an atmosphere of all-consuming fear, ruthlessly using her desperate situation, her son, as blackmail against her." Chambers' face turned white as chalk. "That's not... I never meant..." "Save it for someone else," Ali said quietly but menacingly. Hidden within his soft tone was an unconcealed but carefully controlled fury. "I grew up in poverty in Louisville. I know exactly what it looks like when someone with power preys on those without it, and I will not tolerate it. Not here, not anywhere." He took out his phone. "I am calling my business partner right now. You are finished here." Chambers' hands shook. "Mr. Ali, please. I have a family. I need this job." Ali's eyes were icy. "Kesha has a family too, a 6-year-old son. But that didn't stop you, did it?" He dialed the number. "It's Mohammed. I need you at Champion's table immediately. We have a termination to process." "No, it can't wait until Monday." Chambers sat as if paralyzed, watching his career crumble before his eyes. Ali hung up and looked at him. "Your career here is over. Security will escort you out tonight. And if I ever hear that you've gotten a job somewhere else and continued this behavior, I will personally make sure everyone in this industry knows exactly who you really are." When Ali re-entered the dining room, every eye was glued to him. Kesha, Derek, and all the other employees waited with bated breath. The few remaining patrons watched the proceedings in stunned silence. Ali walked straight to Kesha. "He's gone," he said softly. "You are safe now." Kesha's composure finally cracked. She covered her face with her hands, her whole body shaking with the wash of relief. I thought no one would ever believe me." "I believe you," Ali said firmly. "And everyone here does too." Derek stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. "Mr. Ali, we tried to help her, but we didn't know what to do. We were all afraid we'd lose our jobs." Ali looked around at all the gathered staff. "Listen to me closely," he said, his voice soft, but crystal clear. "What happened here should never have happened under any circumstances. This restaurant is meant to be a safe and secure place for everyone who works here, and that is non-negotiable." He paused, making eye contact with each person. "From this moment on, we are implementing new rules, launching new training, establishing strict oversight, and if anyone ever makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you come directly to me. I am absolutely serious." Silence reigned in the room, but the general atmosphere had changed beyond recognition. The fear was gone. In its place appeared something fragile, but completely real. Hope. Kesha wiped away her tears. "What happens to me now?" Ali smiled gently. "You keep your position, and your salary will be raised. And if you agree, I would like you to help us develop new policies for employee protection. After all, you understand better than anyone exactly what is needed, right?" Kesha stared at him in disbelief. Yes, I would love to." Another employee dared to speak up. "Mr. Ali, this isn't just about Champion's Table. This happens everywhere, in so many restaurants all over the city." "I know," Ali said quietly, "and it has to change. Perhaps the path to doing the right thing starts right here, even when it's incredibly hard." For the next hour, Ali remained at the restaurant. He spoke with each employee individually, listening carefully to their concerns, their fears, and their ideas for improving working conditions. By the time he left the establishment, it was nearly midnight. He sat in his car in the parking lot, watching the staff lock the doors for the night. Keisha walked out with Derek and another colleague, all three talking animatedly about something and laughing. For the first time since Allie had seen her, she looked light, as if she could breathe fully again. Allie closed his eyes, reflecting on the burden of power and responsibility. One restaurant, one manager, one employee who had suffered in silence for a long time. But how many more people like that were out there? He thought about his public platform, his voice, his influence. The battles he fought weren't just in boxing rings. They were against injustice, against people who use their power to harm others. Being successful wasn't just about winning championships or making money. It meant using your success, the responsibility that is inextricably linked to it. Leadership isn't fame or titles. It is the ability to be there when people need you. It means using whatever influence you have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Starting the car and preparing to head home, Allie thought of Kesha's son, of how that little boy would grow up knowing his mother was protected, believed, and valued. That was priceless, worth more than any championship belt. In the silence of the Chicago night, he whispered to himself, "If you want to make the world a better place, start with the world that is right in front of you." Today he did that, and tomorrow he would continue.